Welcome to Cynthia Dill Live. Now, the Cynthia Dill Show. Good to be back. And this is a pregame for tonight's special town council meeting in the town hall chambers of Cape Elizabeth. Maybe you've read the articles in the Portland Press Herald. And of course, on the town website at 7:30 tonight, there is a special town council meeting that was called by the chair, Tim Reiniger, pursuant to the town council rules that empower him to call as chair a special meeting with 48 hours notice, which was given. And the only agenda item is to consider a proposed license to the cookie jar for use of the parking area in front of the bakery that they've used for since really the beginning of the business 50 or so years ago. So 50 or so years ago, before the site plan review law was in place, the cookie jar was established, and the current owners have owned it, for a couple of decades. And in 1999, there was a site plan submitted to make some reconfiguration of outbuildings and a freezer. And fast forward from then until now, just recently, a dispute between the neighbor, the garage, if you're coming out of the cookie jar to the left, Cottage, what is it? The Cottage Street Garage, I believe is the name of the business. It just recently changed hands. And prior to it changing hands, the two neighbors coexisted peacefully and shared a back driveway that allowed traffic to go from Shore Road through the two businesses out onto Preble Street. Now, it's not a great situation over there for anyone, but that's not really anybody's fault. It's just a dense little neighborhood by the sea that has some wonderful little businesses that everybody loves, including the cookie jar. So this new garage owner bought his business. The business has apparently picked up concurrently with massive increases in traffic, as well as a huge construction project just down the road, which I think is kind of interesting, and I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But the new owner said to the cookie jar, enough is enough. Essentially, you can't use the driveway anymore, and parked his truck there. And he has a right to do that, but it presented a very real and immediate problem to the cookie jar owners who, need access to Preble Street. Their customers are used to driving through and being able to circulate in that area in the back. There's some parking spaces. So what they wanted to do was make some pretty minimal changes, right, to respect their neighbor who doesn't want to share his driveway anymore. So what they proposed to the town is I can just share with you the list of things they wanted to make going off of Shore Road to Preble Street just one way. So that's, they want to make their entrance to their business one way. They want to paint the parking spots in the front and along the side. They want to move the shed and the freezer. And they want to open up a little area of Preble Street for the back driveway, for their own driveway. They currently don't have a driveway. They have been using the neighbors. Now they want to use their own driveway. And they also wanted to install an LED parking light in the back of the building. So now that to me doesn't seem like a big deal, does it? Um, parking, parking lot paint, a new light, move around the shed and the cooler, and of course make this cutout in the road. So what they had hoped to do was use the 1999 site plan and just draw on it what they wanted to do and submit it to the planning board. And I think fingers were crossed that that would be enough. And unfortunately, it wasn't. And that's why we are here today. And so then the question is, well, is this meeting tonight with the town council, is it actually a reaction to what's happened and a good faith attempt to try to solve a business owner's problem? Or is it a political stunt? So in my view is that it's both. And there's nothing wrong with that, since we're just, 10 days out to the election, and we have a very real choice of candidates on the ballot. And two of those candidates happen to be the chair of the planning board and the chair of the town council. So, all's fair in love and war. And this isn't war, but it is an election. But when you get to the actual meat of it, What the town council is doing tonight at the, request of the chair is to essentially offer a license to the cookie jar to help them get through this process because they their parking spaces in the front encroach on public space. They always have, and it's never been really an issue until a couple years ago in 2022 when the Shore Road Improvement Plan was trying to make its way through. It's controversial, and this wasn't one of the obstacles for getting that through was the cookie jar parking. And so now it's coming back, I think, to haunt them, that they were a fly in the ointment for the Shore Road Progress, uh, project, and now, I feel a little bit like they're kinda paying the price because really what they wanted to do could have been handled with a de minimis amendment. That I think if you just look at the zoning ordinance for the town of Cape Elizabeth, the section is, 19-9-6 amendments, and you'll see that, you know, an applicant can ask to have a de minimis amendment approved, and it's first screened, of course, by the planner, who's the gatekeeper for so many things in town, and that really bugs a lot of people that so much power is concentrated into an unelected person who is not accountable to taxpayers, who doesn't live here, and, um, not elected. So the town planner is a gatekeeper, and initially decides one way or the other if something can be de minimis and not go through the formal site plan amendment process. But ultimately, it's the chair of the planning board who decides. And so in this instance, I think it's reasonable to infer that the decision was made that this has to go forward, that they can't rely on the 1999 plans and make a few changes. Instead, they had to brand new drawings. The town enlisted an engineer. I mean, we've probably, as taxpayers, already have invested, 50 grand on just allowing this small business to create a driveway on property that they own, that's, perfectly zoned for it, that, uh, it's it's fair game for an election, and it's fair game because I think there's a lot of people who think the site plan review process is broken, and evidence of that is all around. If you just look around town center, all of the empty lots, well, those are all approved site plans, you know? And, the Lumbery had a real problem with they got through this arduous site plan process and then had to go back every time they wanted to move the geraniums to the tune of 10, 20, $25,000. The cookie jar is expected to spend between 35 and $50,000 on this exercise. And if you just think about that for a minute, and then you think about the giant mansion down the street that's creating all kinds of havoc on Shore Road, building an addition to an already, like, monstrosity of a house, and they didn't need site plan review. I mean, that's crazy, and you think about all these incredibly wealthy people who have bought up all the houses along Shore Road, who are only here a couple, maybe a couple of weeks of the year, but nonetheless, their landscaping companies just park in the street, taking up, the whole lane, sometimes hours at a time. We have one-way traffic on Shore Road sometimes at peak traffic to accommodate these very wealthy landowners because they don't want the landscaping businesses in their pristine driveways. I it shouldn't be that a small business in Cape Elizabeth like the Lumbery or the Cookie Jar have to spend 35 to $50,000 to get all kinds of drawings and plans and engineering to do some painting on a parking lot, right? To do some minor alteration of a driveway. And so Tim Ryder is presenting a license, and the license is a good idea. And the license is going to be offered to the cookie jar to help them through the process. And people say that the cookie jar is being used, and you know, that's it reminds me of the Bill Withers song, from 1972. If it feels this good being used, use me up. I mean, of course, if the cookie jar is being offered a license to use the land that they've been using for 50 years to help them through the site plan amendment process and they don't want it, well, they don't have to take it. But I have a feeling that they welcome the effort. And I have a feeling that a lot of people are with them on this, that to put our foot down, that the fact that a couple of new moms think it's dangerous from when they're pushing their strollers on that side of the street, well, walk on the other side of the street or go down Preble Street or rearrange your your routes. But I just feel like this is an issue that is coming very close to to the friction and the tension that surrounds the school bond. And that is that there's a lot of what seems like new, very wealthy people who've moved here and now just want to change everything. And it costs a lot of money. And there's a lot of people who just can't afford it. And we're going to be priced right out of town. And nobody wants to see the cookie jar being priced out of town. And if Tim Reiniger's license passes tonight, if there's 5 votes to give the town manager authority to negotiate a license, that's just something that is helpful to a small business. That saves them thousands of dollars in legal fees, in trying to negotiate some other resolution. So I think it's fair game. I think we can probably expect the usual naysayers, Caitlin Jordan Harriman and Penny Jordan, who have their backs up because suddenly their entrenched positions of power are a little bit shaken. They're in the minority, and I know what it's like to be in the minority, and I know what it's like to be in the majority, and it's much better to be in the majority in a democracy, and that's the time that you do things. So Tim Reiniger, he may or may not get elected in 10 days, but in the meantime, you can't fault him for taking steps that will actually provide a solution for a local beloved business. And you can't blame the other candidates for rallying to the cause of small business. It's a legitimate issue. It separates the chair of the planning board from the chair of the town council. Jonathan Sarbeck, now he I guess can't talk because it's a quasi judicial board, but that doesn't prevent him from giving his position on the site plan review process, on the need for it to be reformed, on the cookie jar in particular. I mean, there's nothing pending right now. Is there about this? I mean, in terms of the license, there's nothing. Jonathan Sarbeck could express his opinion. So could every single candidate, whether they support the town council giving a license. There's nothing to prevent any town council candidate from just saying, "Hey, I'm with the cookie jar on this one." And why don't they say it? I don't know. I don't, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to press Sarbeck, to press Swayze, to press Elizabeth Skyfries. Where do you stand on the cookie jar? Do you support giving them the license, or do you not support it? I mean, where do they stand? Where do they stand? So tonight, we'll see. I have a feeling it's going to be a 5-2 vote. I have a feeling that that they're not going to adopt either license. The town attorney, in my view, should probably be fired. The town council and the chair in particular, they have the authority to hire and fire attorneys. And we used to have Mike Hill for the longest time as the town attorney. I thought he was great. I obviously I haven't been on the town council in a long time, but in my dealings with him, I thought he was great. But for whatever reason, we got new town attorneys, and the attorney tonight, in response to, I guess, the question of whether or not the license was a legal thing, came back with, yes, it's legal, but I think maybe the planning board should approve it. That's not the attorney's role. It's not the attorney's role to decide who should make the decision, because it's it's ultimately the town council who is elected to make these decisions. The planning board could not sign a license. They don't have the legal authority. So the fact that the authority stops with the town council, they're ultimately the ones who can vote to either authorize the town manager to sign the license, which is probably what's going to happen. But the planning board couldn't vote to authorize the town manager to sign a license. So it has to be the town council. And there's no reason to make a town council decision conditioned on planning board approval. I mean, they could if they want to, but what's the point? There'd be no point. So exciting times, because it is before the election. And I do hope some of the other candidates speak up about it. There's the pod people who think that this is political grandstanding. I mean, This is an election. It's a really important election, and there's thousands of people who've signed that petition. And like I said, if the cookie jar welcomes a license, then whether they're being used, I'm sure, like Bill Withers, use me up. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, so we might have a show after tonight's meeting. Tim Reiniger might jump on. Who knows? We might get a few other town councilors. I hope you subscribe to the show. Next show is probably Wednesday night. And talk to you then. Take care.